Greetings, this is International Master Erlend Mikalsen, and this is my video course on calculation. In these videos, we will discuss the calculation process and we will solve problems to try to establish good calculation skills and habits. Before we start solving problems, let's discuss the process of calculation. Now, I believe that it is perhaps a bit different for each individual chess player, but I also believe that in general, the process of calculation follows the same principles. For me, I cannot start explaining the process of calculation without first talking a little bit about intuition. Because whenever I look at any chess position, before I can start calculating anything, my intuition will generate a bunch of different moves that I would like to make. And I think it's the same for pretty much all other chess players. So the intuition is the primary tool for any chess player. And your strength as a chess player largely depends upon the strength of your intuition. Now, how do you improve your intuition? I think mainly your intuition is based in pattern recognition. But it should be said, it is a bit of a mysterious process, how your intuition seems to generate different moves in your consciousness out of nothing. But your intuition is not perfect, and neither is mine. So, after your intuition has generated a bunch of different moves that you want to consider playing, how do you choose between them? Now, this is when we start using the process of calculation. So I have been thinking a little bit about how exactly this process works for me, and I think I have it nailed down to 4 basic steps. So number 1, as I already mentioned, your intuition generates a bunch of moves that you want to make. Number 2, we must calculate each of these moves separately. And of course, it is much easier to calculate forcing moves, like captures and checks. So usually those are the moves we will start with. If there are no forcing moves, calculation is still, or it can still be useful, but to a smaller degree. Then your intuition is even more important. However, but still, if the position is concrete and we can calculate forcing lines with captures and checks, calculation is even more useful. So that is step number 2. After we have calculated each of these moves we want to make separately, we compare them to each other. That's step number 3. And step number 4, we play the move that we like the most. So it's a very simple process, and that's good as long as it works. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna try to make it work. So the first type of positions we are going to look at will be these quite simple tactical problems. The theme is going to be passed pawns. So here in the first position, it is white to move. And let's try to use the process of calculation to solve this one. So first, let's give our intuition some time to generate moves we want to make. Now, do you see any forcing moves? Captures and checks. Well, there is one move that is check, and that is queen e8, but that simply blunders the queen. So we probably don't have to look any further into that line. Are there any captures? Well, it seems the only piece that we can use to make captures is our queen, we can capture the rook or the pawn on c5. If we take the pawn on a4 or c5, we will again simply blunder the queen, so we don't have to calculate those anymore further. However, if we play queen takes a6, which is the only forcing move that I would take seriously in this position, we can calculate. He has to take back with the pawn, otherwise he's just down a full rook, and that's no good. In this case, we have just obtained a passed pawn on b6, and the rook is quite nicely placed behind the pawn. So what do we do with passed pawns? I'm sure you know. We push them forward. So let's play b7, forcing move because we are threatening to take the queen. Oh, I should mention, that is a third way of making a forced move, is usually to create a threat. So we play b7, threaten to play b takes c8, also threatening to play b8, new queen. So then it's quite forcing. He has to play queen b8 in order to block the passed pawn. Now it seems black has solved his problems. But let's not stop looking yet. Maybe we have a good move in this position. Indeed, we can play bishop a5, generating a new threat to play bishop c7, and there doesn't seem to be any defense for black. So whatever he plays, like say bishop f8, we will play bishop c7, captures, b8 queen, captures, and we are a clean exchange up, it seems, which should be a decisive material advantage. Okay, now this is the end of the line. We have concluded we are winning, so let's play the line. Queen takes, now b7, bishop a5, bishop c7, b8 queen, and that's the end of that. Let's move on to the next example. So in this position, we will use the same process of calculation. Do we have any forcing moves? Checks, captures, threats? Let's see. It seems like we have three possible moves that give check: queen f8, queen g8, queen h8, and one possible move that will capture: queen takes c3. We might have a way to generate a threat, but for now I don't see any threats that look particularly strong. We must also keep in mind black has threats of his own, like queen h5. Then he will create a counterattack. So we should probably be looking at the most forcing moves first, which is the moves that give check. So queen f8 doesn't seem to accomplish anything. He will just take our queen. Queen g8, he will play king takes, only move, and there is no follow-up. I mean, we could play g7, threatening to play bishop h7, but then he will go on the counterattack with queen h5. So that's no good. Finally, let's consider queen h8. King must take. Now we can play g7 check. Again, only move is king g8. And here, do we have any forcing moves in this position? Well, there are two moves that give check. It's bishop h7 and bishop d5. We could quickly rule out bishop d5 because he will simply take it with the queen and give check. So that can't be right. But bishop h7, check. After king takes, there is g8 queen. It's checkmate. So that looks right to me. Let's play queen h8, g7, bishop h7, and g8, checkmate. The pawn finally reaches the 8th rank. So in this problem, we are down a full bishop. He is also attacking our queen on c3, and if our queen moves, he seems ready to play bishop takes b2, which would eliminate our hope in the position, the passed pawn on b2. Okay, but first let's, before we panic, let's consider our forcing moves here. Do we have any checks? Well, there is queen e1 check. Oops, excuse me. Queen e1 check. And, well, he will just play rook takes e1, win the whole queen, so that can't be good. Do we have any other checks? No. Do we have any captures? Yes. We have queen takes d4, so let's calculate this move as well. Now if queen takes d4, obviously has to play rook takes d4, otherwise we just have two passed pawns connected for nothing. So he plays rook takes d4. Now, do we have any forcing moves? Yes, we have rook c1 check. Now he cannot play queen takes because then we will take back, promote the pawn to a queen. He has to go rook d1, we will capture, it's checkmate. So after queen takes d4, rook takes d4, rook c1, he has to play rook d1. Now, what do? We have two forcing moves. We have rook takes d1 and rook takes b1. Rook takes d1 does not seem right because he will just take back with the queen, threatening queen d8 checkmate. So we have no time to try to advance our pawns with a3, for instance. So what about rook takes b1? Now he has to take back with the rook, only move. And in this position, we don't exactly have any forcing moves. But we can play a3, protecting the passed pawn on b2 and creating the threat to play a2. Now what do we think about this position? Does not seem like white has any defense, which means it should be winning for black. Okay, we have made our conclusion, so let's play through the line. Queen takes, rook c1, rook takes b1, and a3. Now we are intending a2, and white doesn't have any defense. Although he could try for the cheapo with rook d1, threatening rook d8 checkmate. And as long as we remember to create some luft for the king with maybe g6, we are still winning. Just don't fall for a2. Rook d8 checkmate. But I don't think you would do that. Okay, let's keep going. So, what about this problem? Now we are a bit material down. He is also threatening queen takes e7, eliminating the passed pawn, which seems to be our only hope in this position. So this should create a sense of urgency. Unless we move quickly and find some kind of attacking resource, we will be hopelessly lost. But let's remember the process of calculation. First, look at the most forcing moves. So that would be checks, bishop g8 or bishop takes e4, and captures. Well, only captures, bishop takes e4. We could say that e8 queen is also a forcing move because, well, we are giving ourselves a huge material advantage, at least for the moment. And that seems to be all the forcing moves. Okay, so let's consider them separately. Number 1, bishop takes e4. Check. Does not seem to be working. He will just capture back with the queen, and there is no way for us to securely promote the pawn. So that seems to be losing. E8 queen. Like I said, it has to be considered a forcing move. However, the obvious reply, queen takes e8 from black, well, it also doesn't seem like we have improved our position. So that leaves us with bishop g8. Does this work? If not, we can probably resign the game. So bishop g8 check. Now black has 3 moves, king g8, king g6, and king h8. Let's consider them separately as well. King g8, there is bishop f7, check, followed by e8 queen. That looks winning for us. If king takes g8, it's also quite simple, rook f8 check, followed by e8 queen, winning. Finally, what happens after king h8? That is the problem. Now we have no checks, and we have no captures, and he seems to have been successful at stopping our e-pawn from promotion. Now let's remember the final way to create a forcing move is by making threats. And here we have one way of creating a very strong threat of promoting the pawn. It is bishop e6. After this move, we are threatening e8, queen. But what happens after queen takes e6? We have rook f8 check, king h7, and then we promote e8 queen. This looks winning. We have concluded. Let's play. Bishop g8. King h8, as we remember, takes. Will work quite easily, as well as king g6, bishop f7, followed by e8 queen. Does not work. So king h8, and here bishop e6, queen takes, rook f8, e8 queen, and white is winning the game. This bishop e6, has to be said, is a fantastic tactical resource. Let's move on. So in this example, white is a rook down. So as well, black is threatening rook takes g2, for instance, or rook takes f3. So we seem to be in a quite difficult situation. Nevertheless, the position can be saved. Let's try to find a solution by applying the calculation process. So, what are the forcing moves here? Any checks or captures? Well, we have 2 ways of giving check. We can play c7, and we can play queen e8. So let's calculate them separately. First, if we play c7, bishop gives check. He can play rook takes f3. Now in this position, well, certainly we don't play queen takes f3, because then he will just capture back with his queen. So that can't be good. But we also have queen e8 in that position to consider. And it actually looks quite interesting, because if bishop takes, we have c8 checkmate. Now bear with me, this is a little bit complicated. And if rook takes, again, rook takes, he cannot play bishop takes because c8 queen will be checkmate. So he has to play king b7, and we will be able to play c8 queen with, well, what looks like a devastating attack. So does this mean that we have solved the problem? Yeah, maybe. But let's also consider queen e8 immediately. as I believe it was Lasker who said, when you see a good move, maybe it wasn't Lasker actually, could have been Tarash or Tartakover. Well, regardless of who said it, it's good advice. When you see a good move, look for an even better move before you play it. So here, let's consider Queen e8 immediately. Leaves black with two options, bishop takes and rook takes. We can calculate quite simply after Queen e8, bishop takes, c7, only move is rook takes f3, c8 is checkmate. Okay, so after Queen e8, bishop takes is simply not an option. He will play rook takes e8. We will play rook takes e8. He has to play bishop takes e8. We will play c7, rook takes f3, c8 checkmate. So this line is even more convincing, because here it is forced checkmate in 4 moves. So then we will of course play Queen e8, but let's look through the first line first. c7, check, rook captures, Queen e8, check, rook captures, king b7, c8 queen. Yeah, we should be able to deliver checkmate from this position. Let's see, he has to go something like king b6 and now queen c5 for instance, king back to b7, or it could go to c6, a6. Let's see, first king b7, there's rook a e7, and then checkmate follows shortly. If he plays king a6 instead, well, there should be queen c6, rook e5, and rook takes d5 checkmate. So in this problem, we actually have the luxury of choosing between 2 different paths that both lead to checkmate. But we will, of course, go for the solution that's the fewest amount of moves. This is probably a good idea in general because, well, if there are fewer moves to calculate, usually the chance that you have missed something and made a mistake will be decreased. So let's play Queen e8, rook takes, bishop takes, c7, and c8 checkmate. Okay, let's go to the next problem. So this is one of my favorite problems. Black is 1 pawn up, but white has this dangerous passed pawn on e7. So let's try to solve the position by applying the calculation process we have discussed. Any forcing moves? We could give check a number of ways. We could play queen f4, we could play queen g5, although that's not does not look particularly convincing, because you can just capture the queen with 3 different pieces. So queen f4 we must consider. Also there is knight e3. That's the extent of our checks. What about captures? Not really. I mean, queen takes h6 is the only capture, but again, this just blunders the queen, so let's quickly disregard this move. Finally, we must consider e8, because as we already mentioned, a pawn promotion is a forcing move, because we are quite radically altering the material balance in our favor. So let's start with queen f4. Check, he has to take. Check, we have to take. And we are threatening now to play e8 in this position. Can black stop this move? Well, there is one way. I can play knight d6. Do we have anything here? Doesn't look like it. Let's go through the line. In case you were unable to keep up. Check. And then knight d6 protects the key square on e8. And so there is no way we are winning this. The other move we must consider is knight e3 check. He will probably just move his king back to f6. And well, it's not clear what to do next because he's threatening king takes e7. So this does not seem to be working either. Actually, now we can maybe repeat moves. So let's try king g6 instead. It is certainly not clear what to do here either for white. So finally, let's consider e8 queen. He probably has to capture, otherwise we're one full queen up, so queen takes e8. And here we have a couple of forcing moves again. Queen f4 check is the most obvious one. We could also play queen d3 check, but yes, we must consider queen d3 as well. Knight e3 is a check we could consider as well. So there are three moves. After e8, queen takes e8. So first let's consider queen d3. Now he could play queen e4 maybe. So it doesn't seem like we have any trick to win the queen there, at least as far as I can see. The other line would be knight e3, but again he will just move his king back, and it's not clear what we are accomplishing. So that leaves us with the final option, queen f4 check. He could choose between king e6 and king g6. If he plays king e6, there will be a fork on c7. Knight c7 forks the queen and the king. So he has to go king g6. Here we choose between queen f6 and queen g4. Queen f6, he can play king h7. There is no obvious way for us to make improvement there. What about queen g4? He cannot play king h7 because then there is knight f6, new fork. So he has to go knight g5. Do we have any forcing moves there? Well, I actually have a number of checks. So this is quite difficult to calculate, and we must rely upon our intuition to a bigger degree than otherwise. So do we have any interesting ideas in this position? Actually, I will go through it on the board. e8, queen f4, king g6 now. Remember, king e6 runs into this fork. So king g6, queen g4, again king h7 runs into the fork. So knight g5. So this was the position we were considering. It doesn't seem like there is any way to make progress for white. We are 2 pawns down, and he seems to be well defended, especially this knight seems to be doing a good job. However, if we consider the most forcing moves here, actually the most forcing move would be queen h5, because then he must capture, otherwise we will win his queen. Then knight f4 would be checkmate. So this is the solution. and this is actually all forcing. So the solution is e8, queen f4, queen g4, queen h5, knight f4, checkmate. I think that's all we have time for this episode. So thanks for watching, and bye bye.